It's pretty gay. We have two things on the agenda tonight. We're going to talk about the property owner stat survey that went out about end of February. And then we're going to talk about the last question that was in that survey to talk about rentals. So Scott is going to kick it off, and then I'm going to take a few slides, and then a couple of other board members are going to come up and address their slides. Okay?
Great. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take your little clicker there, Miss Amy. Thank you very much. All right. Whoops. So most of you know I can't stand still, so sorry I kind of wrong a little bit. But anyway, I wanted to start with the overall, it's always good to start a presentation with good news. So we'll start with some good news. So we had 1156 responses in 2022 versus 2,000 the last two times we did this. So talking to my friend Tim Moran, that usually means one of two things and maybe both. The first being y'all might be kind of tired of filling out stuff because in the last year we've hit you with a bunch of things with bylaws. The T4 survey around strategic planning was really important and took a while to fill out. And now we come with another property owner stat survey. So that could be in here. And the second thing is it could mean that in general, people are pretty happy because they tend to fill out surveys more when they're not as happy. So we don't know for sure, but the numbers are a bit lower. The good news is all amenities scored greater than 8, 10 being fantastic, so greater than 8, with the exception of two things. Probably neither of which surprised me, and probably won't surprise you. I'm going to talk about those two things tonight. One is the F&B outlets scored much lower than 8. And the beach club and cafe had Lake Disharoon, and that might have something to do with the fact that we didn't have a Lake Disharoon last year. So I didn't rate that one too high when I did the survey. So anyway, highest satisfaction, thank you Liz Shear and the Trails Committee. You guys take the crown again. So highest satisfaction is the trail system with 9.3. I can't figure out what the 0.7 loss would be, honestly. I rated it a 10. Public safety metrics are excellent. So security and safety is an 8.8. We've really tried to beef up our public safety staff and our rules enforcement in the last year. Guard gate service, 9.2, that's great because that's our front door. It's the first thing you see other than the roundabout. It's the first thing you see about Big Canoe, so that's good. And the fire department, we all love the fire guys. It has a lot to do with why Cindy and I moved here. It has a lot to do with why Cindy and I will probably retire here. So fire department is a 9.4. And Big Canoe's appearance and condition is 8.1, cleanliness of 8.6. So we've been working kind of like crazy on that for about the past 2 years. Got a ways to go, but it's nice to see that that's gotten up over 8. So let's start with how would you rate your overall satisfaction with Big Canoe? In the format of these slides, we'll start with the question that was asked. We'll give you the rating that everybody came in with, and then compare it against 2021 and sometimes against 1 and 2020. Show you what the distribution is, because I think I'm a visual person. I think it's much easier to see like, oh, okay, that's what the bar graph looks like. And then I went through all of the comments, and there were a lot of comments, and they were pretty illuminating. And what I tried to do was take literally 50, 60 comments per question and pull out what I would walk away with common themes. So we were at 7.7 this year versus 8.0 on 2021. That's what the distribution looks like, is over 8 was probably about 70% of the respondents. We had a group of people around 25% were in the 5 to 7. And you think of that as people that are kind of undecided. They've got some things that they like and some things that they don't like. They're not quite ready to go up top, and they're certainly not walking around saying, I gotta sell my house and leave Big Canoe. And then you have a really small amount of people who are probably walking around saying, I gotta leave Big Canoe, so that's good. Top concerns that people talked about were, number 1, clubhouse operations, increasing assessments,
Postal Service, which doesn't surprise us because it was number 1 on the strategic planning survey as well. Too many rules is what some people said, and a concern about, and I've heard this since probably 2018, the first day I moved here, is are we a resort or are we a community? And some people feeling like we had a resort emphasis. So, by the way, our format, we'll go through the slides that talk about operations. Amy will do the ones that talk about the board and governance. And then at the end, we'll stay here all night if you want to. As many questions as you want, we'll try our best to answer them. Please rate the value of your amenity plan. So 7.5 versus 7.8 a year ago. And way up from the 6.7 where we started in 2020. Again, some of that might have something to do with the fact that if you were an aquatics member last year, you didn't have a good summer. If you have grandkids who wanted to go down the rock slide, you didn't have a good summer either. I know that, actually. So, again, greater than 8.0, way up there. A group in the middle, again, around 23%, and then a small group. And the main things, again, were some people said pricing is too high, and other people said we're dissatisfied with the bocce program. So I believe that Jeff is doing a lot to fix the last one. He and I have talked about that a couple times, and we can certainly talk about pricing later if you'd like to. How would you rate that dining experience in the clubhouse and veranda? 6.5 versus 6.9. So this is probably one of my biggest concerns and probably one of the things I spend more time on, and certainly our staff is now spending more time on, is how do we get that out? That just doesn't work. So financially, we're in really good shape with the clubhouse. That wasn't true, as we all know, in 2019, where we were losing close to $800,000. We broke even last year, so financially, which is kind of the foundation of the house, you say, great, we're in good shape. Terrific, and that's really important. However, it doesn't get you the home run. The home run has to be food service. And by the way, you all said, issue is inconsistent service. Food came out strongly as improving, and I agree with that. I mean, I remember when I ate here in 2018, you never knew what you were gonna get. Now you pretty well know what you're gonna get. The food is pretty darn good, and that came through in a lot of the comments. Service, that's what we're working on. Hours were too limited and changing, and again, if you think back when this was done, people were looking back at 2021. I didn't know what the hours were. We were closing, I would get calls saying the entire staff has COVID. We have to shut down on Labor Day weekend. That was not a good Friday to get that call. So I totally understand the frustration because it was constantly how many people are out, who's sick, who's going home, who did they talk to, is that person sick, do we have to send them home? That was 2021 for us. It was harder than 2020 because 2020 we just shut down. 2021, much more difficult. Too expensive, kind of an interesting comment given that we can't even buy beef at the IGA anymore, or at least Cindy doesn't buy beef at the IGA anymore because everything is getting really expensive. And facility needs a makeover. And again, on the strategic planning survey, there were kind of two separate thoughts. One was you have to improve the service, and the other was loud and clear, the facilities. If you look at all the projects that we asked people if they want to do, the clubhouse came out as number 2, postal facility was number 1. So there's definitely concerns about this building. This building's dated. It's also not laid out very well.
Excuse me, Scott.
Yep.
It was number 3.
Thank you. Trash. Okay, thank you. We don't usually talk about the trash because we're doing some things to fix the trash, but yes, it was right up there. How would you rate Black Bear Pub? Same kind of deal, basically 7.0 versus 7.3. Again, the main thing is facilities too small. It's bad because you're running food through there all the time. You're opening and shutting that door all the time. People don't have enough places to sit. It's loud. The noise spills over into the other room. Not the ideal design for how you would lay out a bar sort of pub area. So that came through loud and clear. Bar and food service slow, and hours, just like before, hours were too limited and too inconsistent. Doesn't surprise me. We were shutting down the Clubhouse. We shut down the pub right with it. How do you rate Duffers? Top concerns were limited menu, limited hours, and again, facility needs a facelift. So part of the thing with Duffers, I think, as we look to improve food and beverage is, what is Duffers? Is Duffers a halfway house? In which case, it's all about grab and go, it's all about hot dogs and hamburgers? Or is Duffers more of another dining venue? You want to be able to gather with your friends on the patio and have a wider selection and things like that. That's part of the issue that the food and beverage team that we're rebuilding needs to wrestle with, is what is the role of Duffers in the community? How would you rate the swim club and cafe? You could put missing up there, but we didn't do that. So how would you rate it? 6.9 versus 7.4. Obviously it was going to come down. It was a bad summer for us. Top concerns, the building, the cafe, and parking all need improvement. So Regis is going to be talking about strategic planning and long-range planning a little bit later. That's part of what fits into long-range planning. Too crowded on weekends? Yep, it is very, very crowded on weekends, and there's really no place to expand there. And the cafe needs better quality and selection. We certainly have a plan for this summer when it will be open. There will be water in the lake on Memorial Day. There will be a new seawall and beach promenade, and there will be a cafe that's open with not only grab-and-go stuff, but also some healthy choices. So hopefully this time next year, that would be much higher. I know how to get answers to questions. So the good news here is this keeps getting better. We started out at 7.1 in 2020. We're up to 7.9. Top concerns, yep, mine too. Website needs improvement. We're launching next week the beta version of the website, new website, goes into testing with 15 property owners who have volunteered their time and energy, some of whom have a lot of great background in web and software development, and they're going to kick the heck out of it, and then we'll fix it, and then we'll launch it. So it'll have a search function so you can find things. It'll have a calendar so you can see what's really happening. It'll just be laid out much, much better. You can find the rules and regulations and things like that, which right now are kind of hard to find. So agree. Timely or no response to ask the POA. We try really hard. Sometimes if you go more than a page and a half, Debbie Pickett gets really mad at people and starts calling them and saying, you have asked the POAs, please make sure you fix them, make sure you answer them. So occasionally we'll get a situation where 15 things come in to Jacob Van Zandt in Public Works in one day, and it takes Jacob a little while to clear them out because he's out there trying to figure out how to fix the potholes. But point noted. And hard to get a live person on the phone. Hopefully that's not so true anymore. Terry Sawyer is we moved her over to the lodge. She has an office there right in the side door now. You can come in anytime you want. She just says, hey, please, if you can, call ahead in case I'm in a meeting with a property owner, but she'll do anything that she needs to do for you. So we are also changing all the locks and getting them so they're all open all the time, so people can get in and out of the lodge without going around and knocking on doors. So we're coming out of the COVID shutdown stuff. So Terry says, hi, please come and see me. She usually has coffee and snacks and cookies, things like that. And that's it for the operations side. So we'll let Amy go and we'll talk about the rest.
So, can y'all hear me?
It's on.
How about this? Is that better? Okay, so kind of similar to the other ones. A little bit worse than last year, a little bit better than 2020. Some of the top things that we saw mentioned first, and it was not transparent, which was kind of funny because we did have a lot of people that rated us over 8 and made comments about how transparent we were. So I think it means different things to different people. One of the things that I'm not sure everybody realizes is there are a lot of topics that we cannot discuss in public. It's very common in business and even noted in our governing docs that There's a list of things that we just are, some you'll never know about, and some you'll know about later on. And I know that may ruffle a couple of people, but it really just is the way that it is. Not listening to property owner surveys, we do try. We took the Voice of the Community survey very seriously and formed the strategic plan based on that. And some of the things that we're moving forward with, we really try to order based on that. Same thing with, like tonight, we asked a series of questions, starting, the rental question, and then we followed up with another one. And so we do want to hear about that. That's probably the main event here this evening. We do want to hear what you have to say. Debt and assessments. Let me talk about assessments first. We are facing years of deferred maintenance here. And particularly in the face of high inflation on labor and materials, we're kind of playing catch up. There have also been many years when we've not increased assessments at all, and that was the case in 2021. So if you look at the assessment increase from the beginning of this year, and you spread it over 2 years, it's really less than 5% each year. So it might seem like it was a lot this year, but over the average it really was not. On debt, right now we have a pretty doggone low long-term debt to equity ratio, and what we're doing with this credit facility, we haven't closed it yet, we hope to do that hopefully next week. At that full amount, even if we drew down the entire full amount of the debt facility, our long-term debt to equity ratio would be about what it was in 2016. Also, the debt service on that, and that's if we did it. That's if. We're not borrowing a penny more right away, other than to just refinance the existing loan. And we're going to pay it off on the same schedule. So even if we drew down the entire $15 million, the debt service on that, and what I mean by that is the annual amount that we all have to cover through our assessments, is almost the same amount of money as right now. So it sounds like a drastic change, but it's really not. Not enough property owner input. Well, at the same time, we say people, they're tired of filling out surveys. So I don't know what to say about that. If you feel like you're not being able to get enough input, please contact, committee chairs and people that serve in your committees. They're giving us a lot of input. We rely on them heavily. And we want to hear from you too, but you have every right to talk to committees and give your input through them, or even better, volunteer. And really don't know them. It was just a lot of people that indicated this, and I think it's not really surprising because there were 453 real estate transactions last year and 467 the year before. That's a lot of new people here, all during COVID. And so we weren't having a lot of interaction, we weren't doing live meetings, we were all trying to get outside a little bit, but there was just not that interaction that we would normally have. So I can understand why people would say that. And they were just kind of a lot of middle of the road thought about it. Well, we'll think about it, we'll see how we feel later. I believe the board communicates well to the property owners. About 50% of you think we do a fine job. Focusing on the 5 to 7, that was about 30% have concerns. Said it's better than in the past, so that's good. It was about the same rating as last year, a little bit better than 2020. Need more social media response. This was funny because I couldn't get over how many comments said, we want a direct rebuttal on social media when we hear some outrageous things that are said. And, a lot of people know, I look at Facebook and I have to sit on my hands. It pains me greatly. But we can't comment on social media other than POA platforms. So we just can't do it as much as I want to. We just can't. But we are going to try something, I think we were going to call it Mythbusters, and we'll put it on our website to try to do that. We've been trying to counteract it with Q&As. My gosh, we did a lot on the dam, both dams. But we're going to try to get a little more ahead of the Mythbuster approach, but it's just not going to be on Facebook. Don't know who to believe. Well, believe us. Why not? We signed a code, a standard of conduct, pretty lengthy document, and we have a lot of liability. We're held to a very high ethical standard, and we take it seriously. So it's not in our interest to go around spreading misinformation. You may feel like you never get the whole story because of some of the things I just mentioned. And I may never be able to change your mind, but you are getting the truth. And more live interaction, luckily we've passed out of COVID. We did 2 live meetings in the last 2 months. We did one in February. We had about 18 people that weren't on the agenda there. We did another one last month. We had 8 people. And tonight, I think I haven't counted it, but I'm guessing about 22, but does that count you and Tim and Scott and I don't know who. But anyway, we're listening to you and we're trying to do this live interaction, but we're just really not getting much of a response. So we're trying, but we're gonna see how it goes. Whoops. Boy, this thing is twitchy. Okay. First one was, I feel honest. What happened to this next one? Well, okay, here we go. First one was, I believe we communicate well. The second one says, I believe we communicate honestly. Well, I talked a little bit about the standard of conduct that we adhere to. Hard to know with all the noise. We're gonna, try to get our little mythbusters out there. Missing full transparent disclosure. I'm seeing the repetitiveness here. We'll do the best we can, but you're just not ever probably gonna get everything you think you might want to know. But what we're telling you is the truth. And I think they hide information. I wanted to, I actually brought some notes because of this one. I wanted to tell you all the ways that we communicate. Because we can't reach out and tap you on the shoulder. And we're not gonna knock on your door. So here's what we do, and you're gonna have to try just a little bit to look at these things because we can't tap you on the shoulder. So first of all, we have board meetings. In fact, the last 2, each one of them went almost 2.5 hours, a lot of information. We do the minutes after that, but they're not nearly as interesting as watching the video. Committees have their minutes. We have an admin report that Scott delivers during the first part of the board meeting, and it's also posted on the website under financials. A lot of information there, tons of information there. Then we have our financial statements. Well, let me go back to the admin report. A lot of people have asked they'd like to know more about the citations that are issued. And Scott goes through that every month. He tells you what the type is, whether it was a property owner or a non-property owner, and the category. Let's see. So the next one is, I love this one, measures and tracking. I'm not sure a lot of people even know this exists. Unbelievable amount of information on the POA. It's right in the same area where financial statements are listed. It will tell you how many homes we have, how many gate passes were issued, how many FTEs by department, actual versus budget, how much overtime, how many amenity of memberships. It's a lot of information. If you haven't seen it, please do. We also do another category for annual budgets. We have operating budget, capital by line item, and then we do a quarterly reconciliation. You'll get the one for March, after everybody's reviewed it. We have an annual audit done every year by an independent accounting firm, and they issue a very dry statement at the end of their audit. We review it at the June board meeting every year. But the interesting thing that you really should look at is the notes at the end of the audit. They tell a lot about the business of the POA. If you haven't done it, you really should, because it's there. It has a lot of information. Same thing on the 990. Even though we're a tax-exempt organization, we have to file a tax return. It's called a 990. A lot of information is included in that. It's a lot of dry financial stuff, but it's also some qualitative stuff you would want to look at. In terms of meetings, every year we have the annual meeting the first Saturday in December. The GM goes through a very lengthy description of the budget. We also do that in the November board meeting, right before we approve them. Talk about all the capital projects that were done this year, all the ones that are gonna be coming up. It's a very worthwhile meeting to attend. Unfortunately, not many people attended last year either, so I don't know. But it's a lot of information, if you haven't watched that. Same thing on the town hall. Our next town hall is July 16th this year. Same thing, we'll go through kind of a mid-year summary of where we are. Budget versus actual, and all the projects that we've had progress on, what we haven't had progress on, and what you can look out for the next part of the year. Weekly, we do the Inside the Gates email. Sometimes there are things that are important, they even come out in a standalone way, but you can rely on that every week. Unfortunately, the average has been running only 50% of the people open the email. We did get up to about 70% last week, but it's hard for us to impart information if you don't open the email. So please do that. And then lastly, on a daily basis, of course, we have Ask the POA. We have the Big Canoe Events and Happenings Facebook page. We can't post on neighbor to neighbor. I know that's where a lot of people do get the information. And it sometimes is pretty entertaining, but we're not gonna post there. We have our own, and you can look at that anytime. We also have Twitter. You can use it primarily to look up golf course conditions. This is how you can find out which course you can walk that day and what hours you can do it, and whether it's cart path only. So it's at golf course 27 for those of you who tweet, whatever that is. And then lastly, we have an Instagram page. Who knew? So that's a list of the ways we try to communicate. So we feel like we make a big effort. Hopefully a lot of people think we do and succeed, but I at least want you all to know what's available out there if you're not already aware of it. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Candace for a couple of slides, and then Regis, and then Bob and I'll come back up.
Inappropriate to ask a question at this point.
Well, we weren't really going to open it up, but yeah. Anyway, try to deal with that.
Oh, I'll start with what you've got. It's working, so. Good afternoon. I've got two that I'm going to talk about, and that is the first one is how I feel about how my assessment dollars are spent. You can see that over 8 scored for almost 46%. And then the 5 to 7, we were going to concentrate on what those comments were at rating. And the comments were botching golf course spends are questionable. Scott touched on botching, and that's work in process right now. The golf course information is published, just like Amy said a minute ago, in the administrative report, very much detailed report on how many rounds are played, and then of course you can go over to the summary financial statements and see exactly by department how that department's doing. In the case of golf made net of maintenance operations $300,000 in 2021. It's budgeted to increase by about 20% this year. If the thought process in that question was about the golf course with the renovation or rejuvenation of Creek 9, that was a very communicative process with home property owners, considering non-property owners as well as, non-golfers as well as golfers in that evaluation. And when it did finally vote, it passed by a margin of 2-1. So, last comment under this question is, rating is what more transparency where dollars go. And I think Amy just touched on that in terms of just the number of locations that you can go to get financial information. But what we are going to do, once the new website is operational, we're going to add links to specific categories, whether it be, this is big picture right now, to specific links to the balance sheet, the operating statement, sources and uses, and other pertinent financial information. information. So if you don't want to click in on financial, administrative, and monthly and yearly financial statements, that's another way just to go to the website, main website, and get the links there. And then additionally, we're going to include information that was actually put together by the Finance Committee chairs over the last couple of years that they prepare for leadership in committee, and it's sort of a tutorial on understanding financial statements. So that will be another avenue or approach for those that don't sit or care to look at financial statements on a regular basis. Next question we had for comments is, how would you rate your overall satisfaction with the financial management of the committee? The rating over 8 was almost 50%. And then again, the 5 to 7 range was somewhere between 30 to 40. And so those are the comments that we concentrated on. And the top concerns were not sure. We'd like to see how our dues are allocated each month. Again, go back to financial statements and looking at, I think it's an 8-page report that Jane publishes. Scott oversees, as well as the Finance Committee and the board, before it even gets published or discussed in our monthly meetings. And that really, again, provides a lot of detail from the revenues, which are primarily the 99.5% assessments, and each main line item, and then even by department. So it's a pretty thorough report. So the second question is, monthly assessments are rising too fast for retirees to manage. Again, as Amy mentioned a few minutes ago, that we went for some years didn't even have any increases in assessments. And we've also went for a number of years without really looking at some of the deferred maintenance and enhancements that we need to make to our revenues. So, and again, Amy, we're duplicating some of this, but
A lot of the comments were the same.
yeah. I have had the opportunity to look and study financial statements for a number of years, being in the banking industry, and really the level of detail and the whole process of putting together these statements, and then they're reviewed multiple times by multiple people before they're even published. I think it's a job that's very well done, and we stand very high, and I think on the scale of ranking, when you compare us to other institutions or other companies and nonprofits, and how we report information and how we do our due diligence in the course of that. A good example would be our process that we used in getting our access to capital approved in terms of just the vetting that we did with a very detailed cash flow projection process. So again, we have a very methodical approach that we take on each and everything. So, then the $15 million credit line, Amy mentioned just a few minutes ago that essentially we're going to be, if we're fully advanced, once the principal and interest starts, we'll be paying virtually the same in our monthly principal and interest payments that we pay now on the loan from 2016. So. That concludes my remarks. Strategic planning is next. Regis.
Thank you, Candy. One other thing I'd like to say about that line of credit. It's not the board that's going to decide, or to a large extent, it's not going to be the board that decides if we draw on that or not. Some of the major projects we're looking at, for example, the Clubhouse that we alluded to a couple of times today, that is going to require a property owner vote. If the property owners say no to that, we will not have to draw on that line of credit for that purpose. So it's not like Scott or board or the finance committee is going to make that decision. Property owners will have a great deal of input into that. So now I will return to my prepared remarks. Okay, I know what the strategic plan is for Big Canoe, and it's communicated clearly to me. This was a major initiative I was responsible for from the board last year, was to develop a strategic plan. And quite frankly, the results were a surprise and a disappointment to me. I remember standing at up at the podium at the chapel in last year's town hall meeting in July, mentioned that the 3.8 ranked 38th out of 40 questions in terms of the lowest response. And I was confident that that would improve this year. Well, that was a fail. But in any event, we did, as at least some portion of the property owners know, we did have, a small portion apparently, we did launch a major initiative last year. We formed a strategic planning committee. We undertook a voice of the community survey. We used the inputs from that survey to develop mission, values, and a vision statement. We developed high-level strategic goals, and this year we're in the process of implementing that. So, I thought we did a fairly good job of communicating that, but again, apparently not. So, not sure anymore when it was introduced, but not now. Conflicting information, long-range planning committee versus strategic planning versus master plan, and it changes frequently. I think as far as trying to communicate how we change this in the future is, I know myself, Scott, Amy, and other board members try to refer to the strategic plan in supporting some of the decisions, some of the votes we take. For example, the credit facility was tied directly to the strategic plan in order to implement some of the things, some of the high-level objectives that were developed in the strategic plan. We needed to have this access to this line of credit. So we try to do that. That's one of the ways we try to keep the strategic plan up front and foremost in property owners' minds. I'm willing to listen. If you have any ideas as how we can do a better job, I'm all ears. The conflicting information, long-range plan versus strategic plan versus master plan, agree. That is confusing. At the last board meeting, I tried to explain the difference between, or the relationship between the strategic plan and the master plan. I think some of that, that information was provided after the survey was had closed, but I think that is a very legitimate question, and I will personally try to see how we can address that in the future. As far as the strategic plan changing frequently, that's really a misperception. The strategic plan, by its very nature, you don't change. One of the things is the vision, what we want to do in the future. That shouldn't change year to year, certainly month to month. But again, it's a misperception, possibly or probably confusion as to what the strategic plan really is. So obviously we have more work to do on this. We are working on the master plan now, and we will try to continue to provide updates as they occur. But again, my question to you, the property owners that are here, if you were one of the property owners that responded in the 1 to 3 category, I'd very much like to hear how you think we can do better on spreading the word as to what our strategic plan is. And that's all I've got to say.
And now for the main event. Why you're all here. We are seeking ways to reduce property owner discord over rental property. Sorry about that. As way of background, in 2018, a pretty comprehensive survey went out, mostly on short-term rentals. Does anybody remember that? And it was interesting. The comments that came back, they really haven't changed much from what we hear now. People complain about noise, trash, parking, lights, access to amenities, same thing. But there was an interesting question that said, would you be in favor of placing restrictions on short-term rentals? About 800 people answered the survey, and over half of them didn't say yes. The less than half that did say yes had a menu of choices of how they think we should restrict, and it was pretty equal between a frequency of stay and a length of stay restriction. No clear winner there. So fast forward, and this year the goal has chosen a the board has chosen a goal of reduced property owner discord over rentals. Is something we really want to focus on this year. Bob is shepherding this. So we added a question at the end of the SAT survey about would you be in favor of a percentage cap? Just left it at that, something simple, very high level. We didn't get that many responses because we didn't get that many responses on the survey at all. But 78% of the people said yes. So what we decided was to follow it up with a one question poll, because I know everybody's over surveyed, and give just a little bit more specificity because, at some point we're going to have to drill down on the detail. So we went down just a little bit more and just said, how do you feel about 10%? Knowing that about 8% have acknowledged that they currently rent. There could be others that we don't know about. This does not include timeshare because they're a whole different other form of ownership. So far, as of noon today, that the poll said we got 2,041 responses, and it was split 70-30, 70 in favor of a 10%, 30 not. So pretty close. The problem is the bar to actually make any of those changes happen is so high. It's a real hill to climb, and Bob's going to talk about that next. So, Bob,
Amy,
you can just stay over there if you want to stand up.
Amy, can I make just a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, our work for the strategic plan. One of the board goals, as Amy mentioned, is to address this issue on the divisive property owner feelings over the rental question. This actually came out of the strategic planning Voice of the Community survey. We had a question or a number of questions relative to rentals, and the independent third-party company that developed the survey came back, and their conclusion, and it was on one of the taglines of one of the slides they presented, they said, the rental question is the most divisive issue in Big Canoe. So going back to the strategic plan and our vision, our board goals to enhance property owner experience, we can't possibly, I think we wouldn't be doing our job to enhance property owner experience without addressing what they term, this third-party company term, as the most divisive issue in Big Canoe. So, Bob.
Okay, got my bulletproof vest on. First, let me make it very clear that the board has not taken a final position on what to do, and that's really why we've asked for input from as many property owners in our community as possible. A couple ideas that Amy mentioned that were included in that previous survey were, rather than a percentage cap, install a frequency maximum per rental property, such as so many times a year, or require a minimum length of time for renting, such as a 30-day minimum. Well, first, frequency, as you can probably imagine, Amy mentioned, it's almost impossible to administer. And regarding length of time, given our geographic location, with no really nice hotels in the immediate area, short-term rentals, especially over the weekend, fill a legitimate need for a variety of reasons. And I think many of us, my wife Carolyn and I included, we probably wouldn't be here if we hadn't come and rented on weekends for a number of different occasions. So either of those reasons also could be very detrimental to the housing market. In case in point, from the previous survey, the number of people who rented for just a few days was the primary way that many property owners first discovered the canoe and subsequently bought property here. So a percentage cap on homes is fairly common in communities, and from articles we've seen and research that we've done, a number use of a 10% cap is fairly common. So while it would allow the overall number to grow, meaning having a 10% where we currently stand. In fact, I just talked to Trina today, and we have 240 renters here currently. It would still, the 8%, the difference between 8 to 10%, would still prevent Big Canoe from becoming a predominantly non-owner occupied community over time. However, there's a good chance that whatever new properties are annexed into Big Canoe by the developer, no such cap would be imposed for them. So we need to consider the pros and cons very carefully. A common theme throughout all the comments over the years is the need to enforce the rules and the regulations already on the books. And so I'd like to highlight just some of the things that we've done recently. First, we created an additional full-time position in public safety to assist with complaint calls. We think this will help enforce our rules against both owners and renters, since we have to treat everyone the same. And frankly, based on statistics we're now keeping, it's not entirely clear whether or not owners actually cause as many or more even of the overall problems. As mentioned, we now report the detail of complaints during the monthly admin reports that does during the board meetings and on the POA website. Secondly, or third, we've increased non-property owner amenity fees, and at this time, we have no legal right to collect gate entry fees or significant rental registration fees, as some other communities do. Well, for example, in 2022, the non-owner rates for both aquatics and pontoon boats were increased by 33%, and golf fees increased by 20%. We've increased the focus on registration within the POA, and we've sent warning letters to every person who registered previously as an owner. And I talked to Trina, and this week there are actually 9 letters telling them they are going to be fined for they had registered previously, and they have not re-registered or have not come back and told Trina that we're not renting anymore. Now, many of you may have seen an article several months ago about Dawson County. Dawson County has invoked a new and very stringent short-term rental ordinance that actually may dissuade some people from renting who don't want to deal with these new, more detailed registration requirements, as well as an increased annual registration fee. And we're actually talking to Pickens County to see if they may at some point want to adopt some of those same restrictions. We've also distributed the top rules, meaning the top ways that you can get in trouble with us. And now when new visitors arrive at the gate, rather just visiting or renting, they receive a really attractive guide with very clear cautions about obeying our rules, so there can be no excuse for ignorance. But finally, let me revisit the process that would be required in order to impose a limit of any kind. I mentioned this before, but I think it's so important for us before we spend a ton of money on this to understand the hurdles that we've got to go through to do this. Big Canoe's original covenants have virtually no restrictions on renting out your property. Therefore, it would require a number of things to happen before we could create a cap to pass here. First, if we were to pass a covenant within the structure of our existing government documents to restrict rentals, it would not apply to any owners who did not vote yes. The only way that it could take place that would apply to every property owner would be for us to submit our covenants to come under the Georgia POA Act. The Act has many subtle benefits to the association that most people wouldn't care about, but it does provide a framework required in order to enact restrictions of use that would apply to everyone. So to accomplish this, first, we would need to pass a covenant amendment submitted to the Georgia POA Act. Now, that process would only require an affirmative vote of 50% plus one of the total votes cast, so long as a quorum is met. But then, any additional amendments for a restriction of use would require a 2/3 affirmative vote by all property owners, similar to the bylaw changes last year that failed due to not having enough people vote to achieve a 2/3 quorum, and all would need to vote yes. Unless we can get 2/3 of everyone in the community to vote at all, we see almost no chance of this passing. So what we really want is we want to increase the conversation within the community. You realize that of 2,000 people who responded, if you counted up all the eligible people to vote, it probably is closer to 6,000 people. So getting 2/3 of all of those property owners to vote is just a tremendous hurdle. So once again, we look for your input, we look for your feedback, and just hope that, remember, the whole idea of wanting to reduce the score is, as Regis has said, we want to maximize the customer experience here in Big Canoe. And as long as we find ways, we think, to either enact this or to just find ways to regulate and enforce our current rules, we will do everything in our power to try and make that happen. So Amy, let me turn it back over to you.
We're gonna open this up for questions in just a minute, but let me just say, it's not 6,000 people that have to vote, it's 6,000 votes. And I make that distinction because each home counts twice. Yeah. So it's about 6,000 votes. I mean, when we talk about everybody, it's kind of just a broad brush. It's a lot. That's a lot. Okay. Who's gonna circulate, Tim?
All right, ready here? Who has the questions? Billy?
My question was about something else, so no, that.
Okay.
Well,
Anything, we'll take anything.
Yeah.
Also-
Anything that's on your mind, obviously we're here mostly for this, but anything else. So you'll send name and lot number and question on 3 minutes.
Billy Smith,
Lot number?
10435.
All right.
Now, you were talking about, Facebook,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can't participate in there.
Well, I can talk about puppy dogs.
No, but that's not the point, though. I mean, some of us, follow Facebook. I'm not a social butterfly, but, if you get an email, hey, they're talking about food, they're talking about rentals, and you start looking at it. I was always wondering why I never hear anything from the board, and you just said it's against a law or bylaws?
No, there's no law. We have been strongly advised by legal counsel, don't do it.
Okay, now that's my question, right there.
That's the answer.
Strongly advised, yet Twitter and Instagram is social media, and you say, well, we participate in that.
No, the board doesn't. No, those are POA platforms. We have what I mean by that is the POA has a Big Canoe Facebook and events, I can't say that, events and happenings Facebook page. Big Canoe has its own Twitter page. Big Canoe has its own Instagram page. Board members don't. I don't know how to, but board members don't post our personal opinions on that. That's for us to give you information.
The board can't get into a tit for tat conversation
So you can't respond if I, say Scott ought to be fired for some reason. I mean, that was just a joke, so don't let that. But, you can't respond to something like that,
Yeah,
right?
occasionally on events and happenings, but that's our own platform. Occasionally, if someone does post something there that's just flat out wrong or just a real question, then someone will answer that. But we're not gonna go on neighbor to neighbor and certainly not on the other brands that are out there. We just can't do that. So that address,
Yeah, I was just curious as to why one's okay and one's
because
not.
one of them is promulgated by us.
But we do use Ask POA.
Oh, yeah, the website, all that is social presence, but these days, when I hear the word social media, I generally think Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Next.
Ignacio Leon, 379. I live in Laurel Ridge. Laurel Ridge is a neighborhood with 44 houses. Probably 30 houses of the 44 are rental. And several are full-time rentals, not full-time rentals, but the owners, they never come to. And so trying to pass this, change the rules and limit the number is almost mission impossible. And I walk the neighborhood because I live full time, and I knock the doors when they are parking in the wrong place, and knock the door very polite. I cannot enforce anything, but I very polite said, well, please go ahead and park in the right way where you can park it, because we have a parking spot. And the people do it. And lately, they are doing much better. The noise is another issue, but also if we go politely and try to explain, they improve. So the key, I don't think that we need to spend a lot of money trying to change anything, because it's going to be very difficult, but we need to spend the money in enforcement. And when I call at midnight because somebody making noise, I need somebody there in 15 minutes. But really improve a lot in the last 6-7 months. I don't know what is going to happen now that the summer is coming. Because improved September, October, up to now, but really it's enforcement. All the other ones, if we ever reduce the number to 10% that we are not even reaching now, people is going to be complaining because we have noises and everything in that low percent. So, bottom line, enforcement. My opinion.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Next.
Questions? Yes.
Jim Freeman, 3542. Not a question, just an observation. Somebody mentioned the split on the survey question about 70-30, about the 10%.
70-30 and.
70 on the 10%
Yes.
cap, split like 70
70 in
30.
favor of 10%, 30 not
Right.
in favor of 10%.
And this is just an observation, FYI, and I don't know if it means anything or not. But 6 or 8 people at least that I've talked with were not in favor of the 10% because they thought it was too high. So that may skew your numbers the wrong way. So it might have been 80-20 or 75-25 or whatever if, if it were not a flat 10% number. I don't know.
It reminds me of, and it's it is a valid point, and I got a couple of direct questions about that. Couple things, I don't want to veer too much into detail because we're starting time, we're going to drill down a little bit over time, but it reminded me kind of the CCF vote. A lot of people said, oh no, remember we went out with 2,500 and it can go up to 5. A lot of people said it should be 5,000 tomorrow, and I'm going to vote no if you don't make it 5,000 tomorrow. And then a lot of people said, well no, it needs to be a percentage of the value of the home. Well, we can't do that in the state of Georgia, and it's kind of the same thing with a condo pays the exact same monthly assessments as, you know, a 5,000 square foot house. That's just, you can't do that in Georgia. But anyway, people, I remember Bob Crouch said it, don't vote no because you disagree with one small element of what we're trying to do. Try to look at the big picture. Are we, is Big Canoe gonna be better off in the long run if we do this, even if you disagree with one detail? So I hope whatever we end up with, if we end up doing anything, that people who think it should be less will take that into consideration as to why we have to pick something, and we're not gonna make everybody happy, so just, let's don't split hairs too much over the exact detail. The other reason that I think if we do this, we kind of at least came out of the chute with 10%, is there is some grandfathering involved in the Georgia POA Act, but it's really unclear to me that people who do short-term rentals, if you don't have someone literally in your property the day the thing passes, you don't get grandfathered. So if we made the cap 5% and 8% were renting, how are we going to figure out the 3% that are out? So the devil's in the details for sure, but we're starting high and trying to drill our way in. First, we need to figure out, you know, as a community, is this the best thing? How do you feel about that in general? What do you think about the 10%? And we're going to have to work down and get all the details worked out. Hope that wasn't too much information. Next.
Questions? Okay, go ahead.
I think this is Bill Shaw, 404. This is a continuation of my trek on being the Big Canoe Village idiot. I am still, and Regis, looking at some of the things that were put up. What can we do differently? I really wish, like in our strategic plan, by 2025, all board committees will be open committees. And that we live in a democracy and we elect people to do our business. And we make you accountable and responsible for that business. However, we, the owners or people, have a responsibility to see that we're on that track. Regis, I've got the strategic planning committee, although it was closed, you had some of the best minutes. Just probably raised more questions in my mind, but whoever was doing those minutes did a yeoman's job. And I think that 16 meetings in 8 months, that's really wanting to do your work. But folks, if you want to do something to start transparency, let us come to the committee meetings. Amy, I know take a half hour before the meeting and have your executive session. You can do that and then open it up and let people in. And you don't have to address stuff you don't want to, because that's been done in executive session. You've got to open these meetings up. People have to be able to come in and listen to what you're talking about. Whose ideas are they? What's the interaction? I can't even get that out of the minutes, but you gotta let people in to the discussion. I just don't see any other way around.
Yeah, we obviously brought up this issue before, and Amy's addressed it, and bringing it up here again tonight. I've served on committees. Okay, I'm sorry. All I was saying was that, you've brought up this issue before. Amy has addressed it a number of times. you directed some of your questions to me, so I'm gonna take a shot at it. As someone who has served on the finance committee for 3 years before being on the board, what you say about property owners sitting in these meetings, it's impossible, because you cannot separate the substance from a meeting, the chain of discussion, and say, well, this is executive session, we're not gonna bring that up. It just comes up in the flow of the meeting. And you can't have a meeting where you say, where you're talking about a subject and say, oh, time out, executive session, all property owners leave. So it's, while it sounds feasible and something that could be done, it would just create a very inefficient situation for these committee members who are spending a lot of their time and effort just in doing what they're currently doing without adding this additional administrative burden of trying to separate what's executive session from what isn't.
And the other thing, and I know we've beat this up before, so hopefully this will be the last time we do this, but a lot of what goes on in the committee meetings is hypotheticals. That if somebody is just sitting out there and they're not involved in what's going on and they hear something like, here's a for instance, every time we go into budget, we go, well, what if we made pontoon rates $500 an hour? And then somebody goes, nah, that's a bad idea because, demand is not totally elastic. That'll, pardon the pun, sink the whole situation. So, but then somebody hears that and they run out and they go, they are gonna raise pontoon boats to $500. So,
And it's on Labor Day.
yeah, so anyway, we follow nonprofit law. We're not perfect, but we follow.
Next question is
Next
over here.
question.
Hello, my name is Terry Stewart. I'm at block 3107, and drinks are not on me tonight.
No matter what you say next.
First, thanks for having this meeting. I've got 2 or 3 questions to clarify some information. Well, some of the concerns actually surprised me. Scott, when you picked out the concerns, was it a lot of people said this? So you plugged that one in? How'd you go about determining the concerns? Okay.
A lot of people said it. So I went through honestly, it was probably 2 days of work to go through all those things. And some of it honestly made me pretty sad because as you heard Amy, I've been on POA boards and we did a once-a-year meeting with one financial statement. And you look at the huge volume of stuff that we put out there. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe we put too much out and nobody knows what to look at. I'm not sure. But to see that, I don't understand the financials or I don't understand this, or it really puzzles all of us. And so, we'd love to have your thoughts, contact us directly, send us an email, send us an Ask the POA, come talk to us. Any of those things are great because they were big trends that I pulled out. There was a bunch of other, I tried not to do, there were a bunch of compliments too. So I was trying to pull out the issues for the meeting today, but there was a lot of really nice things you all said too, so we appreciate that.
And I've read every single comment at least 3 times. There was, there were moments of elation and moments of depression, but I want to comment that I've also read them last year, and I read them all from Chambers, and I read them all, and I take them seriously, and they haven't changed that much. It's not like these are new trends, and a lot of people said it. It's the same thing over and over, and we just don't know how to overcome it because we feel like we put a lot of information out there.
And I have a question.
You get a follow-up. Yeah,
Just
you can leave, you can ask.
Just clarification.
Bob, when you were talking about the room and everything, I heard you say, if we did something, it would not apply to anything that's annexed in the big canoe. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Amy, do you want to?
Yeah, Terry, that's if we just took our covenants as they exist right now and passed something like that. Everyone that voted no doesn't have to live by it. We have to go under the Georgia POA Act and pass it by 2/3 to encumber everyone to
I'll
follow.
met the developer.
I'm sorry?
Just annexing new.
Anything annexed.
Yes, and annexing, I mean, the developer has the right, under the rights that they purchased, to create their own neighborhoods and their own covenants.
Oh, okay.
So they do have that, and they do have to pay our dues once they're brought in, but they do have the right to do that, and we don't really know, but there's a good chance a lot of developers don't want to do that.
And
There are
that's
two ways of
fur-
looking at it.
That would further complicate any
Well, it
resolution
does,
to
and there are
this.
pros and cons,
So,
but since you
yeah.
brought it up, let me just say one pro and one con. I mean, the one con is the people that would be voting in what we think of as Mother Canoe are giving, they're voluntarily voting away a right that someone else down the street might have. But the other way of looking at that same scenario is, well, if the reason you don't want a preponderance of rentals next to you, then why not keep them over there? We're not going to do away with them here, but we can at least. What I think I'm speaking for the board when I say this, we're just trying to take the long view. What do we want this place to look like 10 years, 20 years from now, or even 5 years from now? We don't want it to be bought by a bunch of investors who come in and buy every house on the market and just summarily turn this into a. That mean my time's up?
Lee Arthur's lot 1153. Talking about this developer issue, and we got Mike here. We have a cap of 4750, and we built, close to this, there's 100, 150 more lots that can be built on, et cetera. But I know that the developer has the right of annexing properties into Big Canoe. And if I remember right, there's only these large acreage parcels that they would have to develop that then could be annexed. That would totally transform the nature of this community. And this 4750 we have, in effect, is our protection, I guess, from stuff going wild. What would it take to have that number changed, or is there no way to change the number?
Talk to him.
Okay, Mike, you can respond.
Lee, it probably wouldn't be financially viable for us to change that number. The company that we acquired was based on that number. So if that number needed to be changed, we would have to have discussions with the association and to see where that would end up.
So in other words, that 4750 is a protected cap unless the community would some way, somehow authorize or approve increasing that number. Is that what you're saying?
That's fine.
We would not be looking for an increase. No.
Jim Freeman, 3542. I just want to kind of clarify what the gentleman over here was asking about. We've got Mother Big Canoe you talk about, and we have hypothetically some other yet to be determined even development that we don't know that exists yet. It could be merged in at some point in the future. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we've got covenants that govern the Mother Big Canoe, and we know the rules about what can and can't be changed or what's involved in changing it and so forth, and that would apply to Mother Big Canoe as is. So 5 years down the road, some other parcel or whatever you want to call it is now annexed in. What I think I heard you saying is that developer would have the right to have their own separate set of covenants, separate and apart from Big Canoe. It may or may not look anything like ours. Ours are black, theirs are white.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty.
And that's fine. I'm just trying to clarify. I'm not saying that's good or bad or anything else. I'm just trying to clarify.
Right.
So that should have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with, in my opinion, what we decide to do in Mother Big Canoe, because we can't anticipate what may happen there 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. It may be better, it may be worse, it may be neutral. But to worry about that is kind of a waste of time, in a way. I'm not saying ignore it, but I'm saying, we make our decisions based upon, Big Canoe, sort of independent of what might happen for an area that may or may not be annexed at some point in the future that's yet to be determined. That seems like kind of there's things we can control and things we can't. That's when we can't. So to waste time on something we can't control doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Right, no, I just want everybody to be aware,
Okay, any other questions?
Patricia, still 4081. Has a survey ever been done of former renters to find out if they ever bought in Big Canoe? The statement is made a lot, and it's a good statement, but I'm not sure what it means in reality.
Yeah, I actually think that 2018 survey captured that. I do, shockingly, I do not have that number in my head.
I don't have the number either, but we can refer back to.
Yeah.
That was also a question in the Voice of the Community survey.
It was.
And I think the response was like, the question was, have you, before buying, did you ever rent?
Yes.
And I think the answer was to me, surprisingly low, 18%.
You're right, you're right.
21%.
I think it was like, what, 30%?
I think 30 is
I
that.
don't think so.
I don't even think it was 30%.
I thought it was that high on the survey.
That should be her.
I have two more short ones, may I?
Are they linked?
Yeah, because I'm talking about them.
The subject's linked.
The second question is, you mentioned timeshare being an entirely different category.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
They are, let me start a little bit higher level. You know how condos are one thing? That's a whole different animal. Same thing for if we go under the Georgia POA Act. That's a whole different animal, just like timeshares are a whole different animal. So they're a completely different form of ownership. They have their own covenants that specify rentals are allowed. So we would not be able to superimpose onto that. It's just a whole different category in the Georgia law.
So the timeshares that we have are almost exempt from this conversation,
Yes,
and that will never change.
correct. They still have to follow our rules, but whatever was written into their deeds originally in the Georgia law for a timeshare is just a different situation.
Last question. Is there still a pet registration in the Canoe? Is it active?
Yeah, no, we, if you all recall from in January, February, and March, we did a rules revision. It took, we went through the 3 meetings, and public safety sat down with Scott, me, the GovDoc team, and we tried to take out the things that are impractical or unenforceable and implement the things that we can do. And there was no way for us to enforce a pet registration because you can sneak a pet in so many ways it's not even funny. So who are we kidding? Now, you do have to follow the county laws for registration. So in theory, there's still a requirement for you to register. We're just not gonna come knocking on your door because we'd have to know you, first we'd have to see you, and then we'd have to ask, are you registered? And it's just not gonna happen.
Well, the intent was that owners would
Excuse me,
vote.
that's 3 minutes, Patricia, sorry.
It's voluntary, and you can upload it into Dwell Online, and it's searchable, and it's very helpful.
You can still do it.
But we can't require it because there's no possible way we can make sure it happens.
It would be very helpful as an owner if you
Yeah,
go to
absolutely.
Dwelling Live and still do that, because then it helps if an animal's lost or something, public safety has a better
So
chance.
Dwelling Live.
Dwelling Live has the
Yeah,
space
yeah,
there.
to benefit
Yep.
you, but we're not gonna go hunting for people.
Shaw 404. Amy, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
It was your comment you made about the timeshares for a whole other thing, and it's HOA. What did you mean by that?
The timeshares are a whole other thing.
You said that the timeshares were not applicable to situations, then you threw in to condos. What did you do?
Oh, just condominium, it's a different form of ownership in the world. And there's a Georgia Condominium Act, so, you know, you all live in a condo, and you have your own set of covenants, and they're very different, like you own the walls in, as opposed to if you're a single family home and you insure the whole thing, that's all I meant.
Right, I realize that, but it just was inferred that maybe things didn't apply to us because.
No, I just meant it as an
illustration
of how they're very different in things. Don't worry about it. Condominiums and door are treated as door fronts in Big Canoe. That's why you pay the same assessments that anybody else does. Yeah. Timeshares really are different. So if I confused anybody, I'm sorry.
On this issue that Steve Hopper, lot 570, thinking that with ladies. If we were to go down this road of limiting renters, we talk about how much money would be spent. Do you have an estimate of what that would cost?
How much money
To go
to
down-
make this happen?
Yeah.
Okay, doing, of course, now printing and paper costs a lot more money than they did the last time we did this. So I'm guesstimating probably about $10,000 in a hard cost to print the ballots and, you know, mail them and gotta pay the auditors to count it and all that kind of stuff. The unknown are the legal fees we would have to pay to go through. We have to write a covenant change, then we have to draft a more restrictive covenant change, and then they have to craft the ballots that go with that. And I can't really sitting here right now tell you what that might be, but just know that would be on top of the 10,000.
Okay. Questions? You got back here first.
I want to apologize because I have to leave early. There's a commissioners debate for Pickens County. But my name is Terry Cardenas, and I have property 6029. And I have the pleasure of hosting a guest at my home on a relatively consistent opportunity for them and us. I have had, in my experience since my husband died, probably 6 or 7 of my guests bought homes here. And they were looking and they were searching. If I could just make a suggestion, I think it would be noteworthy to have an opportunity to have a small group of persons who host, persons then who represent our dear man there. I apologize, I don't remember your name. But where we could sit down and talk about protocol, how to be an excellent host, and how to be part of Big Canoe in a way that enhances our experience rather than kind of beats it up. I would like to ask that you consider that, and I thank you very much.
Sure, here. So Billy had an association, and we got together with him and David a couple of months ago, and I think you all passed it on to the person that bought your business. Is that right, David? And Scott's been trying to get in touch with him because we wanted, that was kind of the whole impetus of when we met a couple of months ago, was to get something like that going. Unfortunately, it never got off the ground because y'all have never been able to make contact. I ran into Gene at the wellness center last week or something, and we were just starting to talk about this. So please, you all need to do this. We don't have any legal purview over rentals right now. We can't really force that to happen. We would love for you all to do that. We want to work with you to remove as many, obstacles and sources of complaints as possible. So I would love it but y'all are gonna have to do it.
My name is Roger Shaw, lot 3519. I have a little POA board experience in my past, and so trust me, I'm very sensitive to the issues of trying to make changes of the type we're talking about. But just so I understand though, is we are saying that we're seeking ways to reduce the discord. that Regis also referenced earlier on about rentals being the number one divisive issue. I have to say, a lot of us though are not anti-rental at all. We're just anti-rental in my neighbourhood. and I think the truth of it is that just so I understand though, is that we're currently saying we've got 240 rental properties. A number of those will be short-term rental properties, and I'm sure some are most of that. Yeah. But most of them are short-term rental. Yes. And here we are now saying that we're talking about 10%, and I realise that's not in stone, I understand that. But we're saying the maximum build out is 4,750 homes.
Yeah, right now we have about 3,400 lots, and what you all think of as Big Canoe.
So we're saying then, Amy, that currently we have a problem, and we have a degree of discord that we're seeking to improve it. And yet that's 240 properties, but at build out, actually we would be allowing some, almost twice that number in terms of rental properties there.
Yeah, at a broad stroke, yes, it would be more. It grows organically as, but I explained a little while ago why I kind of feel like, well, if we go 5%, we are gonna open up Pandora's box like crazy. We're never going to deal with that. But no, it's a good point. As the number grows, it does grow. We're just trying to take the big picture of, you know, we don't want this to become 50%.
No, I understand that. No, I'm sensitive to the difficulties in making those changes. But nevertheless, if it is a problem, we really do need to look at this one though.
So is that, are you saying you would vote, you would be in favor of a 10% cap, or what are you saying?
I think 10% is way too high, but nevertheless, and I do think that just having a very broad cap of 10% is actually kind of missing the point though. Because I think that, for example, there are, as a gentleman referenced earlier on, there are some neighbourhoods in Big Canoe where when you bought into Big Canoe, you had an expectation that your next door neighbour would be a rental property. But many of us are bought into single family home neighbourhoods without that expectation, and it's quite something of a shock to see some of the behaviours that we have been experiencing. And that's our problem.
And it has been suggested that we could somehow divide up neighborhoods, allowing rentals in some neighborhoods, not in others, but it would be prohibited to do that and illegal, and we'd probably be challenged if we did.
Now, Jim, are you going to touch on that? Where we're going right now? Is that your next question?
I was going to ask, why is it illegal?
No, I'm saying it would very much be challenged because we would be discriminating. So
Well, I understand that, but you said it would be illegal.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean illegal, I meant it would be potentially legally challenged.
Okay, and I think what all Roger's saying is that if 240 homes are a problem, 475 is going to be a bigger problem.
And if they're if we only had 10 and they were the one next door to you, then you got a problem.
Well, right, I promise you,
perfect answer here.
it's a much bigger problem when it's next door to you or across the street from you than it is in the macro sense.
So do you think an absolute number as opposed to a percent? I mean, far more communities have gone with a percent, but do you think a number is the better way to go?
Well, it certainly seems to me that if we've got someone who bought a property, knowing that he could rent it, and that's how he financed the whole thing, it would be completely unfair to say that you can no longer rent your property. That wouldn't be right.
I get it. So you're a no. I mean, that means this will never pass.
No,
Because everyone bought under the idea that they could rent.
What I'm saying is that if someone bought a property on that basis and he's part of the 240, it would be completely wrong for us to tell him he can't rent property anymore.
Not at
But
all.
I do think it would be reasonable, though, for us to say the maximum number of properties that can be rented or corporately owned for rented within Big Canoe, there is a finite number on that one. That wouldn't punish those people, because then someone buying into Big Canoe would know that they couldn't rent in the first place.
Right. Going forward, if we ever got to this point, you would have to know that even if you're buying a house that's currently rented, that doesn't mean you go to the top of the list, you go to the bottom of the list. So are we saying the same thing or not? I want to
I
just
I
make
think
sure.
what I'm saying is a finite number would seem to be a good way forward.
He wants a number set.
So you think an absolute number would be better than a percent, because the percent does grow? Okay, that's something we can definitely talk about. I just want y'all to understand why the number was higher than you might want. Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, Billy Smith again, lot 10.
You're gonna get it by next month, Billy.
Couple of points that I want to bring up is the gentleman over here was talking about cost legally and all that sort of stuff. This is an area I've got a little bit of experience. I've been through this process before. Our POA can expect $40,000 to $50,000 in legal fees to get this thing started. But that's not where it ends, because somebody is going to challenge it. I can promise you that. I've already challenged one of your actions in 2019. It will be challenged. So what I think what we ought to be thinking of is everybody is saying that it's a high bar. It's not going to make it. It's unlikely that it's ever going to pass. The POA ought to grow up, take the responsibility that we have a set of bylaws that we've had for 50 years. Your job is to support those bylaws and make it happen. And our job is to require you guys to start enforcement. I mean serious enforcement. I want enforcement because I've seen complaints, noise down the road, for example. Okay, I've asked Regis, prove it to me, Regis. Can't do that. So that is really a non-complaint. If you were to get down to the most legal aspect of this, that is a non-complaint. You've got a complaint, but you've got no way to prove it. I, on the other hand, have spent an hour with Ricky in public safety. And you'd be surprised as how many of these complaints are really non-complaints. There's somebody who's got a rental next door to them. They can't get rid of it because our bylaw says you can't, so you start making up all these stories about what a bad person they are. We need serious compliance ruled by enforcement. And if you do that job, I think that most of the folks that I see in here, I know to some small extent. We're all neighbors. And we ought to be able to get down and talk these things over. I've suggested this 3 years ago. And, you know, the board, to your discredit, has said, we don't want to get the two of you in the same room together. Well, yes, it is true. Oh, yes, how they did it, too. I did say that. Yes, he did. And
those two people, yeah.
But in any case, we need to accept the fact that these are our bylaws. And
when you say bylaws, Billy, you mean the rules?
Rules and regulations, I'm sorry. These are our rules and these are our regulations. Everybody in here bought a piece of property knowing that that's our rules and regulations. So don't come in here now and try to change them. Let's try to work with them and make it where we can all be happy folks. I mean,
so you're saying you don't think we should embark on a vote of some sort?
I really don't, because I don't think it's going anywhere, but I will say this, I think you're missing the boat. What you really need to be focusing on is corporate structures. Because I'm telling you, that's the next big wave. Is you're gonna see people coming in here buying a dozen houses here and a dozen houses there. I see that as something that the board could do. You could write some regulations right now because those people aren't here to object to that. Which brings up one last point, is somebody said about, what about having different areas that is, where it's restricted? And I totally disagree. I've been through this before. If there is somebody in your neighborhood renting a home, then yeah, that particular neighborhood they're stuck. That's the way it is. But on the other hand, if there are neighborhoods around here, which we all know they are, and there's nobody renting in them, you ought to be moving fast right now to either put that neighborhood in a POA that restricts further use of rentals in that neighborhood. And I heard you say you can't. I know you can.
Okay, here's the thinking on that, is that because when we spend POA dollars, we can't spend POA dollars on a specific house, unless we're enforcing a rule, of course. We don't have any legal, and I keep thinking of Wildcat, like Jim and I talk about this conversation, because Wildcat is only known as Wildcat because it was recorded that way when the lots were platted. And that's what gives us the right to have separate architectural standards in Wildcat and all the other places, because it was recorded that way. It's, it's not its own HOA. We have no legal authority to impose an HOA on an area that has one. An even better example that y'all probably may not have thought about is Lake Watch Village. You would think that would have its own. No, it's no different than a house in Wildcat. Same thing for Choctaw. We have no legal authority to make this happen, and I think we would probably be challenged if we spent POA dollars trying to do so, for the very reason I just mentioned about we can't go around spending your funds to impose something on you. So it's just probably not going to happen.
That doesn't prevent that neighborhood. That does not prevent that neighborhood
If a particular neighborhood,
from organizing.
let me talk about Laurel Ridge, because I think you mentioned that. Can I finish?
Please
Can
do.
I finish?
Please do.
Okay, Laurel Ridge. If Laurel Ridge, just say you were 30% rental, what do you?
No, 30, also
30.
44.
Okay, so a lot of rentals, okay, so try that, try imposing that on them, forget it, now you all can attempt that, but when 3/4 of your property owners do it as a matter of course, the likelihood of anything like that happening is zilch. Okay.
So I want to talk about something Billy said, which I totally agree with. So it is about enforcement, and the public safety department is here for the community. We really, really, really are. So what I need everybody to do is to call public safety, not to go on Facebook and start disparaging people and things like that. Call public safety. We're going to come out. Doesn't matter whether you're a property owner or renter. Everybody's the same. And we're going to check. We're going to check the noise. We're going to check the lights. We're going to look for trash. I have a lot of good people that rent homes that contact us and say, we will be there in 10 minutes, Scott. We'll be up here. If you guys see trash or something, we will be here. We're going to help you, because we want to make sure that, all the things that show up sometimes on Facebook, whatever, that is not the standard. So the way that I can get ammunition for budgets and boards and people is everybody kind of working together. Call public safety, we'll come out and we'll check. We've talked to Billy and then David, and we're definitely all about sitting down with rental folks. And for example, we came up with the rules and regulations brochure that we hand out now. We're distributing that to folks that are renting through VRBO, and they're sending that out ahead of time before the person even gets here. Because the chance of the lady with the kids in the station wagon and stuff reading that whole thing is probably not so high. But if she gets it ahead of time, when they're planning their visit, we can get the word out. So there's a lot we can do while we're talking about governance and high levels and 2/3 and all that stuff. There's a lot we can do as a community to make sure we can kind of live together, because we have to. The summer's coming, and we do have another public safety officer 24/7 that we didn't have before. So we're trying to really ratchet up enforcement. And that applies for everybody, renters, non-renters, what have you. So I would just ask you guys to work with us. I know the rental community is trying to work with us. We're trying to find a path through this while we figure out what bigger things we might want to do.
We are in Big Canoe, but we are also required to obey the ordinances ordinance by the two counties. And I don't know if you've read the specifics of the Dawson County ordinance that is now in effect. But you could document, if you had a bad situation with someone making noise, and you documented it, took photos, did a recording, I've already asked them if the property owner provided you with that kind of documentation, would you invoke a fine based on that proof? And they have said, yes, they would. So I think, once again, enforcement, we aren't going to get Dawson County to drive out here. And by the time they get here, probably, whatever the noise problem would have been is gone. But the requirements of the new Dawson County enforcement ordinance are, very, very restrictive.
Yeah, I think after 3 of those, Bob, the
Yeah,
ordinance
there are
goes,
3 of them.
you lose the right to lease it all.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Well, again, that's the county, and I think that the real enforcement should be Big Canoe. That's
So,
who-
would you pay more for us to add more staff? What do you think?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but I would, I would think that, all of us would or should, because this isn't just a rental issue. What about the guy that lives on top of the mountain who's got a drunk for a son that comes every other weekend? He's not a renter, but there's just as many, and which brings up the next thing is, at least since January, we have started having a tally of who's breaking the law, so to speak. It's mostly owners. It is not renters.
I understand.
So-
we're starting into the high season, so, we'll see if it changes, but it definitely hasn't been that way.
We have another question?
Another comment, you have to remember, I am not defending the people that rent, I am not in the rental business. But Airbnb, you can grade your guests. So if you have a bad guest, you can scratch him from Airbnb. Because I travel a lot and I try to be very good renter or Airbnb guest, because they evaluate you in the same way that you have a super host, and so we can use that as a tool too.
Wow. VRBOs to say go for it.
Yes, both companies do a lot better job than in the past with some rental companies, because this is a evaluation of the guests.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? It's not an easy one, folks. Even tonight, within the group, is just a wide range of what to do. So think about it, tell your neighbors to think about it, send us your comments.
I guess I have a final question. So what's the next step as far as communicating this?
Yeah, the board meets on Monday, the poll won't be closed, I don't actually expect it's gonna change much, but. At the board meeting next Thursday, we'll tell you what the final poll was. And then in the, ensuing weeks after that, we're gonna be talking about it. And we'll probably have something more to say in the May meeting. I don't know if we'll be all the way there yet. I'd kind of like to see how the rules enforcement is going now that we'll be, going into season, just to see if that's making things better. I'd like to think it would. We're not against renters. We just want the complaints to go away, We will, if we do take it to a referendum, we'll have to have a drop dead date for a decision on that, so we can get ballots printed and get legal, documents put together. So we can't dally all year about this if we're gonna do it, but definitely won't be next week. We'll let you know about the poll, and then we'll talk a little bit more in May. And pretty soon after that, we're gonna have to make it.
Yeah, I was thinking about all of the surveys. just not this one question, on how all that's going to be communicated. The questions y'all went over prior to this one.
Yeah, okay, so some of the things, like I think we've been talking about, maybe a little tutorial on where to go look. We're not gonna do that until the new website's up, because if I do it right now, it's all gonna be defunct. And that's gonna happen, when is that gonna happen, Scott?
Depends on how the testing goes in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, yeah, beta testing starts off, I guess, next week or something, so, later. Gotta be later, gonna have to be after the website. We could start our Mythbusters thing pretty
Yeah.
soon,
Yeah.
right? We don't have to wait till the new website to do that. I mean, we do try to get the facts out, but there you go.
So I kind of figured we'd probably spend most of the night on renting, and we did. But everything that was up there as an issue, right? Our operations is got a plan to try to deal with. Whether it's we don't quite yet have the right staff in the clubhouse, we're actually in really good shape for back of the house, so kitchen staff and things like that. We're great on waitresses. We're looking for a management team, honestly, that can elevate the service experience here. We've had a bunch of turnover there, and we're looking for the rock stars. And we're doing searches. We have a lady coming from Colorado this weekend that we're going to be working with. So a bunch of stuff there. Communications, absolutely. New website. Mythbusters, as Amy said, we're going to try to keep getting the Q&As out, more and more information. The website will help because you can find stuff better. So, we're doing that. Everything up there, we are trying to say, okay, that didn't score high. Let's put a plan together, and that's on us. That's totally on us. And if you have any questions about that, because I know we talked about renting a lot, just hit me on Ask the POA or something, and I'll be happy to answer.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming out. I hope this was, I know we didn't solve the final answer, but I hope it was helpful to have some give and take and discussion. I appreciate your input.
Good, how are you?